I'm obviously concerned when the president wants to tack on an additional 25%. I'm very, very disappointed.
The American tariffs, the new tariffs on steel and aluminum, are unlawful, unjustified, and illogical. I agree with the member.
We have major breaking news right now. Donald Trump will be announcing a national emergency on electricity after Ontario imposed a 25% tariff or surcharge on electricity.
In March 2025, America got hit by a quiet bombshell from the north. Ontario, Canada's most populous province, announced a 25% surcharge on electricity exported to the United States, targeting over 1.5 million households across New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. Overnight utility bills surged, and if the policy holds through winter, U.S. consumers could be looking at $110 billion in extra costs over the next 12 months. No military threat, no tariffs, just the flick of a switch and a surge in your power bill. But the most surprising part, this move didn't come from Ottawa. It came from Ontario alone.
We'll never be the 51st state. Canada's not for sale, and it's very clear that we just want a mutually rewarding business relationship, partnership with the U.S.
A provincial government, not Canada's federal leadership, just escalated a trade war with real consequences for American homes. Why now, and why electricity? As it turns out, this wasn't a random act of aggression. It was a surgical response, and the first shot in a far more dangerous game.
I'm a man of my word. When we agreed, when I went down there with Secretary Lutnick, they pull off the 25% additional tariffs. We take off the surcharge that we put on electricity, and that promise was broken.
The blow wasn't random. It was retaliation with surgical precision. In February 2025, the U.S. shocked its northern neighbor by slapping a 50% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum, a move that sent Canada's industrial heartland into a tailspin. Ontario, home to thousands of metal workers and auto parts manufacturers, was hit hardest. Exports to the U.S. plummeted. Plants scaled back operations. Layoffs spread like wildfire through communities built on cross-border trade. But while Canada's federal government debated its next steps in closed-door meetings, Ontario didn't wait. It acted. Premier Doug Ford, facing mounting pressure from unions, factory owners, and energy companies, made a stunning announcement: Ontario would unilaterally impose a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the United States. Enough is enough, he said. If Washington wants to choke our economy, we'll hit them where it hurts, right in the grid. And hurt it did. The impact rippled through the Great Lakes region areas most dependent on Ontario's hydropower to avoid blackouts during peak demand. Overnight power providers scrambled to adjust pricing. Consumers watched their monthly bills spike. Entire manufacturing zones saw electricity costs surge by double digits, threatening output just as spring demand was set to rise. This wasn't just a local dispute. It was a provincial-level escalation that shattered the usual diplomatic script. No official embargo, no international hearing, just a quiet switch flipped in Toronto, and millions of Americans left in the dark. In doing so, Ontario sent a loud message to Washington: trade wars don't end at the border, and provinces can strike back even when nations hesitate. Canada didn't fire a shot. It didn't raise a flag or issue a warning. It just reached for the socket and pulled.
We can be an energy superpower, and we have all the components in nuclear, in hydro, in potentially in carbon capture and storage.
That's all it took. For decades, America's northern states have quietly relied on a powerful lifeline from across the border: hydroelectric energy. Ontario and Quebec together supply over 20% of electricity demand in regions like New York, Michigan, and Minnesota, especially during peak winter and summer seasons. It was a deal built on trust, geography, and mutual benefit until that trust was broken. In March 2025, after Trump doubled tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum to 50%, Ontario struck back in silence. Not with politicians, but with kilowatts. The province announced a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S., sending shockwaves through local utilities and consumer wallets. The impact was instant. Over 1.5 million American households were hit with power bill increases ranging from $80 to $120 a month. For businesses, especially manufacturing and agriculture, the costs are even worse. Energy-intensive operations like refrigeration, assembly lines, and irrigation are suddenly bleeding cash. The total projected economic drag more than $110 billion annually, according to regional energy economists. But this wasn't just about raising money. This was about sending a message. Premier Doug Ford made no effort to soften the blow. In a blunt press conference, he declared, every dollar of that surcharge will go straight to lowering energy bills for Ontarians. We are redirecting American money to Canadian families because we're done waiting for Ottawa to fight back. It was a stunning admission. Ontario wasn't just covering its losses, it was flipping the script, turning an export deal into a domestic subsidy, punishing U.S. tariffs by tapping into the very infrastructure America depends on. And the brilliance? It was perfectly legal. No treaty broken, no direct retaliation. Just a pricing adjustment on commercial electricity, exports a line item on a bill quietly adjusted with devastating geopolitical effect. While Washington was focused on aluminum and steel, Ontario turned electricity into a geopolitical weapon, not a single sanction, not a speech, just a price tag changed and a political earthquake. Canada doesn't need to fight a trade war, it just needs to flick the switch. Not all wars are fought with bullets. Some are fought with barcodes, purchase orders, and silence. While headlines focused on electricity surcharges, Ontario launched a quieter, far more psychological front in the trade war. One that didn't rely on tariffs or angry speeches, but on subtle surgical restrictions, ones that would be felt not in Washington boardrooms, but in American wallets and egos. The first move, a total ban on U.S. firms bidding on Ontario public infrastructure contracts. Bridges, hospitals, school expansions, all now off-limits to American companies. For firms like Caterpillar, 3M, and General Electric, this means millions in lost revenue, and worse, being publicly blacklisted in Canada's most populous province. Then came the blow that no lobbyist saw coming. Every American-made wine, whiskey, and beer was quietly pulled from Ontario's government-run liquor stores. No press release, no protest. Just empty shelves where Jack Daniels and Napa Reds used to be replaced by French, Italian, and domestic Canadian brands. It was part boycott, part flex, and it hit where it hurt American branding pride. But Ontario didn't stop there. New import taxes between 10% and 25% were slapped on key U.S. agricultural products, eggs, dairy, and fresh fruit. For Midwestern farmers and Californian growers already reeling from drought and inflation, this was a gut punch. Canada is one of America's largest export destinations for food. Now it's becoming a fortress. And while the provincial punches were landing, Ottawa entered the ring with a $30 billion retaliation package targeting iconic American exports like motorcycles, ketchup office furniture, and even ketchup. The message was clear: you tax our metal, we'll tax your household staples. But what made these moves so unnerving wasn't their scale, it was their precision and symbolism. Pulling U.S. liquor off shelves, that's not economic policy, it's psychological warfare. Blocking American firms from bidding, that's not budget discipline, it's a message you're no longer welcome here. And taxing food, that's not just retaliation, that's a reminder that even your breakfast depends on global goodwill. Each missing bottle of Jack Daniels, each canceled bid, and each blocked egg delivery, these weren't trade policies. They were silent wounds to America's ego. $110 billion in projected consumer losses, 1.5 million households facing higher electric bills, cross-border trade grinding into friction. And yet Washington says nothing. No emergency press briefings, no congressional hearings, not even a single tweet from the White House. For millions of Americans from Michigan to Minnesota, it feels like being under economic attack without anyone in D.C. willing to pick up the phone. But the silence isn't accidental. It's strategic and political. The root of the crisis traces back to a single move: Trump's doubling of tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum in early 2025. It was a bold escalation meant to project strength and revive U.S. manufacturing. But the backlash was faster and sharper than anyone in the West Wing expected, and it came not from Beijing or Berlin, but from Toronto and Ontario's power stations. Now, with Canadian provinces hitting back in quiet but powerful ways through electricity surcharges, import bans, and public contract exclusions, the White House finds itself cornered. Push back and it looks like you're caving to foreign pressure. Do nothing and Americans keep paying. Caught between two political optics, appearing weak on trade or blind to domestic pain, the Biden administration has chosen a third option: silence. And that silence is costly. Governors from affected border states have started raising alarms privately, urging federal coordination and tariff revisions. But so far, no federal action has been taken, not even a symbolic one. In part, it's because no one wants to own Trump's economic legacy. Rolling back his tariffs could cost political capital among swing voters still loyal to America First rhetoric. But defending them means defending the pain now rolling down onto working-class families, rural co-ops, and manufacturing districts. So Washington waits, hopes it'll blow over. But every day of silence feels like surrender not just to Canada, but to the consequences of a trade war no one wants to admit has already gone too far. As Canadians recalibrate, retaliate, and redistribute the pain, Americans are left wondering. If our power bills rise, our groceries get taxed, and our exports get shut out. But no one in D.C. responds who's really in charge. And how much more silence can the American economy afford? While Washington stays quiet, Ottawa is making moves. Big ones, strategic ones, permanent ones. But while Washington paused, Canada planned. From Halifax to Vancouver, a new economic map was being drawn, one that no longer centered around D.C. At the center of this shift is Mark Carney, the former Bank of England governor, and now the architect of Canada's new economic playbook. With quiet precision, he's orchestrating a national pivot, not just away from tariffs, but away from dependence. Across the country, massive investments are pouring into port infrastructure, railways, and digital logistics. From Prince Rupert to Halifax, terminals are being expanded, cargo routes modernized, and cross-Pacific lanes rerouted. The goal: connect directly with Asia and Europe, bypassing the U.S. middleman. But this isn't just about logistics. Canada is doubling down on domestic production. Steel plants in Quebec, battery hubs in British Columbia, food processing in Saskatchewan. The nation is building supply chain resilience not with slogans, but with steel concrete and server racks. And it's working. Trade volume with the European Union is up. Exports to South Korea and Japan have surged. New bilateral deals with the UK and ASEAN nations are moving faster than anything coming from Washington. For decades, Canada relied on the US as its dominant buyer for aluminum, timber, auto parts, even electricity. But that era is now closing. Carney's plan is clear: a North Star economy that doesn't orbit Washington. While America looks inward, tangled in election year drama and tariff chess, Canada is building outward towards stability, diversification, and independence. And for the first time in decades, it's not asking for permission. If the US wants to play hardball, Carney is showing that Canada can build a new game with new partners, new priorities, and no need to look south. The question now isn't whether this shift will happen. It's how much the US will lose before it even notices. Every product traded between the US and Canada crosses the border multiple times, from car parts to dairy, from machinery to fresh produce. Trump's tariff wasn't just a fee, it was a wrench thrown into a precision engine braking parts that crossed the border 6 times just to survive. Factories are stalling, warehouses are backing up, transport routes are unraveling. And this isn't a trade war with winners and losers. It's a lose-lose spiral with no end in sight. Now the question is no longer, what will it cost? It's who will take responsibility. If Ontario truly pulls the plug, who pays the price: American families or the American government? When electricity becomes a political weapon, when food prices surge, when supply chains break. This isn't about tariffs anymore. Did Trump just trigger the largest energy crisis in U.S. history? If you think the lights are flickering now, wait until the winter comes. Share this, subscribe, stay informed.